All right, folks, Roland Martin here. I just landed in Decatur. First of all, Springfield, Illinois. Flight was delayed. Drove to Decatur, Illinois. So I'm here. Sorry we were late. Of course, today is Friday, January 18th, 2019. On today's show, of course, the sentencing for Jason Van Dyke, the former Chicago cop who shot and killed Laquan McDonald. He was convicted of second-degree murder in that case. Today, he found out how long he is going to serve time in prison. We'll have a live report from Chicago. More details are emerging about the racism at a General Motors plant in Toledo, Ohio. We will talk with an official from the Ohio Civil Rights Commission who investigated racism at that particular plant. Also, Tamika Mallory, co-president of the Women's March and a guest on last night's show, is still being attacked because of her support for Palestinians. We'll break it all down for you. Also, R. Kelly no longer has a record deal. We'll tell you why Sony Music dropped R. Kelly today. And also, Texas Congressman Louie Gohmert is absolutely crazy. He decided to double down on the comments by Steve King after he was already blasted in a 424-1 vote by the U.S. House. Wait until you hear what Gohmert has to say. And also, more crazy white folks. It's a new job opening at McDonald's. Black folks, we can feel it. We can tell you exactly what happened. The more craziness in America. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, I am here in Decatur, Illinois, where I was speaking tonight to the Decatur, Illinois Human Rights Commission for the MLK event. And so, of course, the flight was late. And so normally we have a different type of arrangement, but literally just ran into the hotel room to go live with you guys. And so we are here. All right, as we speak, in Chicago. I landed in Chicago, flew to Springfield, drove to Decatur. But what's happening right now in the courtroom in Chicago, prosecutors are trying to see if the judge will agree to sentence a former Chicago police officer, Jason Van Dyke, anywhere from 18 to 20 years in prison for killing Laquan McDonald. And so as we stand right now, that sentencing hearing is going on as we speak. Joining us right now is Brandon Pope, reporter and anchor for WCIU TV in Chicago. Brandon, this is explain to people why it's taken so long to sentence Jason Van Dyke. I mean, normally in other cases that I've covered, sentencing happens shortly after the person has been found guilty. This is strange.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Roland. And a lot of it has been the defense for Van Dyke with a lot of Hail Mary attempts. They've been complaining all throughout the trial about a change of venue and how bias factors into that. They've been throwing everything they can in the book to try to get their client off. And because of that, we've seen constant backlog and shifts. But finally today, really just moments away, we're going to learn his fate. The judge is at the stand right now, Roland, and he's going through what he told the jury. He's expected to give his verdict on how much time Jason Van Dyke should serve in jail any minute, and it could be up to 96 years.
And of course, I'm reading the Chicago Sun-Times their live blog, and this was posted about 11 minutes ago, where Jason Van Dyke said to the court, "As a God-fearing man and father, I will have to live with this for the rest of my life, taking it to my grave. No one wants to take someone's life, even in defense of one's own. It's a choice you live with forever." And again, what's interesting here is to hear him talking about in defense. But the bottom line is, it was because of that videotape being released, we saw that Jason Van Dyke lied. He said that Laquan McDonald was charging at him. The tape clearly shows that Laquan McDonald was not charging at him when he fired those shots that killed him.
Yeah, and that's why the jury decided that they made the decision they did, because the video was clear. Nothing that any experts they brought in to say to the contrary can go against what you're seeing with your own eyes. That video played 20, 23, 24 times in court, Roland. I was right there in the courtroom. Tough to watch for the family and for anyone in that courtroom constantly seeing it, but it was right there in your face, and it couldn't be disputed at that time. And now, from what I see, and the way things have gone so far, especially from the witness testimony, there's no way he's not going to get any time at all when it comes to the sentencing.
Now, of course, we do know yesterday another judge waited about a month to sentence to make a decision in the case of 3 Chicago police officers who were being prosecuted for obstructing justice and covering up for Jason Van Dyke. People are still angry with that. This judge pretty much took the prosecutor's case apart, and people are befuddled by the judge saying that, well, people could look at something 2 different ways and it still not be wrong. What are folks in Chicago saying about what the judge did yesterday?
You know what, Roland? There's a lot of feeling of one step forward because of the conviction, but then one step back because of that decision on the cover-up trial. And it's kind of laid a really heavy, dark, gloomy cloud over today, because that just happened yesterday. So many people thinking, wow, the justice system back at it again, just when we had a little bit of hope that maybe there can be justice for an unarmed black teen here. You see these cops, clearly they lied on their police reports, and it said that right there. But this judge decided that she was not going to charge them. Now, a lot of people on Twitter, social media here in the Chicago community are talking about making sure they get that judge out of office in the future because of that decision. And so it definitely has an impact, and it's got people feeling a little more gloomy about what could happen just in a few moments here with Jason Van Dyke's sentencing. However, the impact this is going to have on the Jason Van Dyke sentencing and how much time he serves, if he ends up serving a lot of time, his defense team can actually use the acquittal of those 3 officers in their benefit.
Gotcha. And so, again, so we are awaiting that decision, and so we will see what happens in this case. It is. I'm looking at some of the comments that were also being made, Brandon. I'm gonna go over that with my panel. So I thank you, and so we'll see what happens with this sentencing verdict. We appreciate it, Brandon Pope. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, I want to bring in my panel right now. Ray Baker, host of Public Agenda Podcast. Also, Joe Madison, host Sirius XM Radio. Eugene Craig of the Eugene Craig Organization. I'm reading something. So the wife, first of all, before that, the Fraternal Order of Police president praised Jason Van Dyke, saying that, quote, if justice is served, Van Dyke would not get a long prison sentence. And he, of course, blamed Laquan McDonald, saying that he shares in the responsibility for his own murder. And they're not here to take the responsibility, and they're leaving it on him, and that's wrong. Praising Van Dyke for having a good work ethic, and he made sure that people were taken care of. But it's again, what you have here are, again, FOP doing whatever they can to protect a cop, frankly, who was found guilty of second-degree murder. Joe Madison, you first.
Well, this is typical FOP. Anywhere in the United States of America, they always take that position. And the sad thing is, Roland, is that McDonald is not here to speak for himself. So it's easy to condemn an individual who is no longer with us. He's dead. He can't speak for himself. So the reality is that I don't think it's going to have much of an impact. I don't know this judge or the judge's record. But I think most of Chicago would be extremely disappointed, no matter what the FOP thinks, if it is not a lengthy sentence for what now amounts to murder.
Ray Baker, I'm reading the comments made by Jason Van Dyke's wife, Tiffany. She said, quote, "My children have paid the price." She also talked about having to spend $400 to $500 a week on phone calls so her kids could speak to her husband. She said also that they've been afraid for their life. In reading this, she said her biggest fear is that somebody will kill her husband, quote, "for something he did as a police officer, something he was trained to do. There was no malice, no hatred on that night. It was simply a man doing his job. My other fear is that I'll never see him again. My children will never see him again." And obviously, Ray, one heart goes out to any wife and children, but that was someone who he killed. And there's another family that will never see Laquan McDonald grow up. They will never see Laquan McDonald get married. Will never see Laquan McDonald have children. This is what the reality of when cops kill and are found guilty of murder.
Perhaps she can now join the chorus of the many of us who are invested in prison reform to make sure that those who are behind the wall are treated like human beings. It's amazing that we find people who have a come to Jesus moment about this after they've been afflicted. But particularly what we found here, Roland, which what I think is important for your viewers to know. We have seen Mr. Van Dyke's family and defense team bring out everyone, including his African-American brother-in-law, to testify on everything about how good of a man he was, to how when the Fraternal Order of Police employed him as a janitor, he came to work on time at 6 a.m. So that's something to say that a convicted killer should not serve time in jail. These all types of excuses, reasons, and drama-filled plays, if we will, to try to compel the judge to think that Van Dyke shouldn't serve time in jail. And if this judge finds that to be true, there may be a litany of convicted folks in Chicago who may want to come before this judge particularly to say, I too am a good person. I also don't deserve time in jail.
Eugene, again, we've covered so many of these cases, and at the end of the day, unfortunately, what we have seen is cops have gotten away with this. The fact that even though they tried to get him convicted on first-degree murder, the fact that the jury chose second-degree murder, I mean, this is a case just like Holtzclaw, who sexually assaulted those black women in Oklahoma, just like, of course, the officer in North Charleston. At the end of the day, what you have here is there has to be justice on the part of a community. Officers cannot simply kill people with impunity.
I agree 100%. I mean, just to address everything, I mean, first, wow, what another trash FOP that's coming out and defending a trash officer that took trash actions that led to a drastic, tragic ending. His wife, we feel for the family, but hey, welcome to America. Welcome to the result and the impact that has been felt by many black and brown families over the last couple hundred years. Which many that her husband are responsible for putting behind bars. But it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the McDonald family. But it's a tragedy that this is an anomaly in this country. It's a tragedy that police officers still feel as though that they're above the law. One of our founding principles is that no man is above the law. I mean, we broke away from a whole other country for that.
Eugene, I got to interrupt you. Again, prosecutors were seeking Jason Van Dyke to be convicted. They wanted 18 to 20 years. Folks, the verdict is in. Joe Madison, a Cook County judge, has sentenced Jason Van Dyke to more than 6 years in prison.
81 months.
81 months.
Mm. Well, I can hear the uproar in Chicago now. I can understand second-degree murder. I'm certain he didn't wake up Van Dyke and say he's going to kill Jason McDonald. But it appears what the judge has done, and I'll have to read his statement, but it appears what he's done, he cut it in half. And reality is that the wife is now going to be able to see her husband. The children are going to be able to grow up. 6 years is absolutely outrageous. McDonald's life is worth more than 6 years. All our lives are worth more than 6 years. I suspect that right now people are probably out in the streets of Chicago, and they probably will be this King holiday weekend. This is, I'll be honest with you, amazingly disappointing. And I don't know what else to say about it. I guess you better strap in. It's going to be a very rough ride in Chicago.
Ray, it's not just even sliced in half, and literally it's
yes, really. That's right. That's right. Because I think you said it
less
was
than a third.
It wasn't
almost a quarter, because you were looking for 18 to 25 years.
But he could have got even
96
years. He could have got 96.
Of the minimum
96. Hold on, Ray. Hold on, he could have got 6. Prosecutors sought 18 to 20.
Right.
The judge said 6 years in 6 3/4 years, 81 months.
Oh, crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a new precedent for second-degree murder. Let's see her next case.
You know, Roland, the interesting thing is, particularly when we find white officers killing black people, let's not forget when Oscar Grant was handcuffed with an officer with a knee in his back, Johannes Messerly served 4 years, was sentenced to 4 years, and in fact, that information came out, that sentencing came out the same day that the basketball player LeBron James made his announcement of the decision to go to Miami, and Johannes Messerly spent less time in jail than LeBron James spent in Miami. This is happening too often, and there will be some among us in the American public who will say, well, didn't you get justice? Aren't you satisfied? Is this justice? Ought we be satisfied when justice is not applied equally to all human beings? Eugene laid out the fact that this nation is premised under the idea that no man is above the law. Time and again, white police officers in the United States are demonstrating when they kill black people, they are above the law. This sentencing affirms that. It affirms it. So when people say out loud, say Black Lives Matter, it is not because we don't think others do. It's because clearly our judicial system, clearly law enforcement, clearly all of those who are the allegedly unbiased and impartial decision makers in our nation don't believe Black Lives Matter. And Brother Madison was correct. The citizens of Chicago, if we know anything about Chicago, we'll remind them today, tomorrow, and in the ensuing days, and in their upcoming city council elections and mayoral election, that black lives do indeed matter.
I agree 100% with Ray. I agree 110% with Ray. And with the upcoming elections, I mean, people have to remember, you know, and this has been a process, you know, first we've gone out after a lot of the mayorships, and then it was the states and district attorneyships. Now you got to go after these judgeships, and you got to go after the sheriffships. You know, the sheriff is the highest level of law enforcement in the land, and could, to a degree, rein in some of these out-of-control police departments. But you got to play in these judgeship elections. We got to run candidates that will equally apply the law. The one thing I'm interested to see is how this particular judge's next second-degree murder case is going to come up, and what kind of ruling that they're going to hand down for the next person, the next couple sentences for second-degree murder. You know, if these roles were reversed, if Laquan McDonald had, you know, had murdered Jason Van Dyke in second degree, he would be serving the full 96 and probably and then some.
And let's also add something. I bet you there'll be time off for good behavior. I bet you that he will not serve that full term.
My question is, are they going to put him in GP?
Well, again, we folks, for everybody who just tuned in, Jason Van Dyke, the former Chicago police officer, who was convicted of second-degree murder late last year for killing Laquan McDonald. This is a case that stirred Chicago and caused massive protest all across the city because the city fought vigorously for the videotape, the dash cam, not to be released publicly. When it was released publicly, it unleashed those protests. It also caused Anita Alvarez, who was Cook County State's attorney, to lose her job. Kim Foxx was elected largely because of how Anita Alvarez's office refused to prosecute Jason Van Dyke, and they were very late in doing so. He was convicted of second-degree murder, even though prosecutors sought first-degree murder charges. And today, just a few moments ago, a Cook County judge sentence Jason Van Dyke to 81 months in prison, even though prosecutors were seeking anywhere from 18 to 20 years in prison. He could have, though, based upon the charges he was convicted of, could have been sentenced up to 96 years in prison. So think about that. Up to 96 years in prison. Prosecutors said, let's seek 18 to 20. The judge slashed that by 2/3 and said Jason Van Dyke, a Chicago police officer who lied about Laquan McDonald charging him, convicted of second-degree murder, only sentenced to 81 months in prison. Let's go to our second story, folks, and that is we told you yesterday about this unbelievable story of racism out of a General Motors plant in Toledo, Ohio. Talk about just unbelievable when you look at the details in this particular case. Now, before the suits were filed, there were complaints that were filed with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. And we're going to talk to the head of the Civil Rights Commission in just a moment to find out what they found out about. But this is what the General Motors appealed their decision, and this is what the commission said in rejecting their appeal. GM showed indifference to the situation by implying that employees made too big a deal out of the nooses, as well as engaging in racial comments themselves. Nooses, swastikas, white-only signs, ethnic slurs, racial jokes, offensive or derogatory comments, racist poems are repetitive in respondents' workplace. The totality of circumstances was ignored, and respondent treated the situation like a single-issue harassment case, not a hostile work environment. Joining us right now from Columbus, Ohio, is Darlene Sweeney Newburn. She is the Director of Regional Operations at the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. Of course, they investigated the complaints at GM. Darlene, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. It is stunning to read the indifference. It's stunning, Darlene, to read the absolute indifference of General Motors to this level of racism at that plant.
Yes. You have the documents in front of you. The Ohio Civil Rights Commission, which is a law enforcement agency, we did receive a number of complaints about a racially hostile environment. And from that, we began an investigation. How this actually works is that when someone files a charge with the Civil Rights Commission, the first thing we try to do in most instances is to create what we call a win-win situation, depending on how really bad this is. We took a look at these cases and said, no, there's a bigger public issue here, and we must go and dig into these allegations to see where this leads. And as you well know, what you have read is true. These are the types of things that we did find that was happening at GM. There were racial slurs where you had not only employees, but you had team leaders referring to the African American employees with the use of the N-word. And you had them, as you read, probably what's most shocking to a lot of people is the use of the word Dan. Roland, do you know what that means?
Yeah.
That is, first of all, when you hear this, and when you think that this is a major global multinational corporation, not only that, a corporation that has a very extensive diversity effort reaching Black consumers, when you think about General Motors, but again, trying to educate people to understand that this is what happens, that this is not General Motors in Detroit. That's the parent company. This is the plant in Ohio, and that speaks to the kind of workers there in Ohio.
Yes, this did occur in Toledo, Ohio, and it occurred over the commission investigation lasts just about a year. And during our investigation, there were incidents that were occurring while we were investigating. What really prompted the investigation not only was the filing of the charge, but the allegations that there were noose in addition to racial slurs being made. Now, this was in 2017, and we were saying, what? Not that this was really as surprising as I made it seem, because the Civil Rights Commission, this is what we do every day. We investigate these type of allegations and more. But in this particular instances, you not only had one noose, but during the time we were investigating, 2 more nooses were hung.
Wow.
In addition, we started having the whites-only restroom. So when an African-American would go to the restroom, they had to look up at the wall as they entered and see whites only. When you sit in a stall, you may then see the Confederate flag or swastika written inside of the stall. You may walk down through the plant in a particular area, and you may see other racial slurs that was going on. In addition, you had the commission found you had the managers or the supervisors referring to African Americans as boys. Again, we use the N-word was used quite often in that plant. It was all kinds of stuff written. What was interesting is that they had the black president of the union, who was Ray Wood, who, as you know, filed a charge as well, and I believe was on your show already.
Yeah.
He did attempt to try to address this, but he was hitting a brick wall, and there was retaliation the commission filed because he was trying to correct this extremely hostile environment. There was a lot of anxiety going on. GM's response, more or less, to the commission is not that this wasn't occurring, but their response was, hey, every time an incident happened, we took action. Understand that the law says that you must take prompt remedial action. And they said, that's what we did. What that means is if you took prompt remedial action, it would have stopped. And that didn't happen. It continued and continued.
Darlene, Darlene, this is Darlene, this is Ray Baker here in Washington. One of the questions that I'm curious about reading this, we saw even attacks against white women who were socializing with black men, and we saw that the white employees were refusing to listen to their black superiors. What did that mean for black folks who were trying to climb up the career ladder? When the white people enlist to them, did we find that they were stifled? Were they leaving GM altogether and then not progressing in their career? What became of that?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Although the commission did find a racially hostile environment, we did find that there would have been some denial of promotions here. All of that played into this. Please understand why the most glaring has to do with the racial slurs and the nooses. It is true. You had one individual, Tammy Van Riper. She did join in and say, hey, this is wrong. She was part of the union. As a result of that, there was all kind of really racist and sexist poems that was spread, that was actually hung throughout the plant, talking about her and Ray Woods. She had, if I recall, she had applied for a particular position and she could not get that position. So this stuff is not mutually exclusive. So yes, it is correct that you will have individuals, black and females, in some instances, not being able to progress. Well, first of all, they were leery about progressing. They did not want to deal with the hostility, the disrespect. Just think of the anxiety that one feels. What does it mean when you have a noose hanging in your workplace? I believe that sends a clear and convincing message. But believe it or not, that alone is not what even the courts would say is enough. 1 or 2 incidents of a noose hanging, in most cases, is 1 or 2 noose hangings by itself won't just do it. However, the commission found that it wasn't just the news hangings; it was all the other incidents of racism that went along with it.
All right. I certainly want to appreciate you, Darlene, for joining us on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Great job exposing exactly what took place at the GM plant in Ohio. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you.
I want to quickly go to Eugene and go to our panel here. Eugene, first I'll start with you. When you listen to this administration roll back civil rights protections, now all these people say, oh, these things are so behind us. This right here says it's not. And it took place in the heartland, where everybody keeps saying that's where we should be so focused and more be like the heartland of America.
It's a joke. I mean, these folk are Trump voters. I mean, these are the folk that split their ballot for Sherrod Brown and and Donald Trump and the new Republican governor in Ohio. But what it shows is that these issues aren't behind us. And it hurts and affects people of color and black people in particular in many different ways. It affects the morale. It affects, brings up it's a throwback to the past experiences. But more importantly, the racism that these workers were experiencing affected their careers and economic interests. When you're going to work and you have to deal with nooses, it's not just dealing with nooses, it's not just dealing with swastikas, it's not just dealing with Confederate flags, it's dealing with being looked over for promotions because the people that are allowing those things to happen are your supervisors.
And Joe, not only economic, this impacts the health of black folks. We know the impact of racism on the health of African Americans, and people act as if, this is no big deal. No, this is our reality.
Yeah, I mean, all medical science has shown that. But, I do want to bring something up, and I've been chopping at the bit on this. Let me tell you something. The president of the union, do not leave the United Auto Workers out of this. They knew that this was going on. These are union members. That is a union town. And I'm not anti-union. My father worked for the Buick plant, was a UAW member all his life. I lived in Detroit. But I am saying to you, the president of that union at that plant has been at that plant for 34 years. So let me tell this panel something. If you don't think for 34 years that he knew all of this was going on, I guarantee you that that president, and by the way, you should see his comments where he sort of, for lack of an unsophisticated word, he poo-pooed this. Oh, there's something there. There's something that's not there. But if he's been at that plant for 34 years, I guarantee you he knows who did it. Yep. He's part of the problem. And the damn UAW International in Detroit ought to be in there right now dealing with those union members. So while they're looking at General Motors, I am saying to you that the union is culpable in this also. These are all union members.
Great point, Joe Madison. We surely appreciate it. We'll go to a break right now, folks. We come back. We're going to talk about R. Kelly losing his record label and also the continuing drama with the Women's March. We'll be joined by Jameer Burley from New York. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
The black man cannot protect a country if the country doesn't protect him. Minister and militant activist Henry McNeil Turner.
All right, folks, our hashtag HBCU Giving Day School is Oakwood University. Oakwood University, of course. They were founded in 1896 in Huntsville, Alabama. It is owned and operated by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Notable alumni include Brian McKnight, Mervyn Warren, Barry Black, and also Little Richard. I've also spoken there at Oakwood, and guess what? It's a completely vegan campus. No meat is allowed on the campus. Lord have mercy. If y'all want to support Oakwood, go to www.oakwood.edu. I think that graphic is wrong, guys. That looks I I've never seen www.2. So I think it's www.oakwood.edu. www. What is www2? www2.oakwood.edu. All right, I ain't never seen that one. So www.oakwood.edu. And so please support the folks in Oakwood. Great campus there, and I definitely enjoyed my time there. And okay, so yeah, I'm checking something right now because I just tried to go there. So again, so that's the website. All right, folks. R. Kelly, of course, he has not had a good month. Today, Sony Music announced that they have dropped R. Kelly as one of their artists. For all of this time, Sony Music, their RCA label, they were clear that R. Kelly was going to remain on their record label. But they have been under intense pressure from people all across the country to drop R. Kelly, and that actually happened today. Now, although they've dropped him as an artist, Sony RCA still is in business with R. Kelly as a result of his back catalog. That's where the real money is. Also, folks, Kelly's former manager surrendered himself today on charges of threatening the father of Joycelyn Savage. She is one of the women who is still with R. Kelly. Her family has been trying to get her free, but they have been unsuccessful to do so. Also, the folks there in Chicago and building inspectors have been going after his recording studio, saying that it violates code there because it is not supposed to be a place where folks inhabit. So they're trying to target that as well. And so been lots of protests, all those different things. I'm going to quickly go to our panel here. Ray, to think about how the targeting of R. Kelly. And again, he was acquitted in the case that folks still are stunned by, not because that wasn't him on the videotape, because they could not ascertain the age of the young girl on the videotape. And he has been roaming free, doing concerts, making money. But it looks like the walls are crashing down around R. Kelly.
They are, and it's good. And I think this interesting, the word choice you used initially was that he was targeted. And if this is indeed targeting, I'm excited. And I think that we need to target a lot more. And I harken back to what the actor Idris Elba said when they asked him about is he worried in the age of Me Too being a male actor in Hollywood? He says, no, not if you have anything that you shouldn't be ashamed of. And so it is high time that, as we say on the internet and on Twitter, I know you're familiar with this, Roland, that we get R. Kelly out the paint. We've been trying for a while. There's been a number of women who've been leading on this for a while. There's been a number of us who've been supporting them, trying to get him out of the paint for a while. And if it has to take this documentary, if it has to take law enforcement, building inspectors cracking down, if it has to take Georgia Bureau of Investigations going to go get him and every other predator out the paint.
And one of the things that also has happened, Eugene, is that you see the backlash from artists. Lady Gaga, she has asked streaming services to remove the music that she did with R. Kelly. Chance the Rapper, who also has done songs with R. Kelly, he also has asked those streaming services to remove those songs as well. And so again, by not playing those songs on streaming services, that's money R. Kelly is losing.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, it's great that Sony's now taking the stance, but it really doesn't affect R. Kelly. We're living in an age where artists have the most level of independence that they've ever had. But the real hit for him is if the digital streaming platform DSPs actually start pulling his music. But until that happens, I mean, to some degree, Sony dropping him actually kind of empowers him because now he doesn't have to engage in any type of splits with the record label, and anything he drops is he can take 100% revenue of. But if the DSPs decide that they're going to remove his work, he'll start taking a very, very serious hit.
But Joe, it is impacting him because again, I landed in Springfield, Illinois, and on my way to Decatur here. And just a week or so ago, he was supposed to do a concert in Springfield, Illinois, but they refused to grant him the permit. And so people are now coming up with different ways to shut down the revenue streams of R. Kelly.
That's absolutely right. And like any stream, particularly revenue stream, it doesn't last forever. When you have this type of controversy. I suspect that what these corporations, and remember that this is business, they have now probably a team of lawyers that's looking at every accusation. They're looking for evidence. That's exactly the way it's going to play. And, you know, it's going to start to impact, as it already has, and you said it, his concerts. Then, you know, there's going to be sales. So, you know, he is, you know, he, like the old folks said, he made his own bed hard in this. And I'm sort of reflecting back, everybody, when we thought that Dick Gregory, C. Dolores Tucker, Joe Madison, that we were crazy. When we told gangster rappers, you know, you got to stop this and have respect for women. And now the women are saying, you're going to have respect for us. And that's why the Me Too generation has had as many victories as they have. I mean, if you think R. Kelly's got problems, let me tell you something. When you're the head of CBS and you lose $26 million in one shot, you know, R. Kelly ought to be counting. Huh?
120.
Oh, I'm sorry. $126 million. I mean, that's some expensive sex, man.
Well, now, of course, Les Moonves, his lawyers have announced that he is going to be fighting CBS when it comes to that money. But I got a feeling he's not going to win this one because they have the evidence where he actually was trying to impact that investigation. But you're absolutely right. This is a whole different day. R. Kelly has had lots of fans out there. He still has fans out there. But if you see, what's happening with Alex Jones, here was someone who was he was banned from Twitter, banned from Facebook, banned from YouTube. Then just the other day, the folks at Roku said they were adding him, but they got such blowback that literally on the same day they announced that they were not adding his channel. And so people are shutting off avenues. You see what's happening with hate groups, how they're able to raise money online. But then what happens is the companies that process credit cards begin to say, they're going to stop working with them as well. And so when we talk about this idea of boycotts, this idea of going after the pocketbooks of people, that's what we're seeing. And so they're targeting R. Kelly that way. Folks, speaking of targeting pocketbooks, of course, we told you about, looks like did you guys lose my Skype? Or you lost the video, but still the audio? Okay. Okay, cool. So let's go to our Steve King story. So Steve King, the Republican congressman from Iowa, white supremacist, of course, who was, put in check by the United States House of Representatives. Well, guess what he is doing? He literally is raising money off of him being stripped of his committees. This is what he sent out. Quote, the unhinged left has teamed up with Republican never-Trumpers and is pulling out all the stops to destroy me. Since they were unable to defeat my campaign in the 2018 midterm elections, the rabid leftist media is currently blasting the airwaves in a pathetic attempt to paint me as a racist. But the reality is his own words have painted him that. You have, Eugene, 2 newspapers in Des Moines, in Iowa, have called for him to resign. He clearly is not trying to do so, but trying to raise money, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is this. The only way Steve King's going to be dealt with is by being defeated in the Republican primary, and then we still have to hope he doesn't pull a Joe Lieberman or Lisa Murkowski after that. The fact of the matter is this. There is a good part of the Republican base that agrees 100% with your Steve Kings, your Louie Gohmerts, your Matt Gaetz, your Duncan Hunters. I mean, there's a good part of the Republican base that agrees with them. So, where the big dollar max-out checks may dry up, you'll see them still be able to raise money from your small dollar donors, your people that, will click through a Breitbart banner and kick in $20 to a Steve King, or click on the Drudge banner and kick in $20 to Steve King. And so that's what he's relying on. That's what he's turning to. And he has some allies. In the original draft of the letter, I wanted to address the Freedom Caucus as well, because it's one thing to kick him out the House Caucus, but if he's still able to caucus with the Freedom Caucus and a couple other caucuses on the Hill, he still has political power, even though he's not on the committee.
One person who is absolutely beyond stupid is Louie Gohmert of Texas, Republican, and Louie Gohmert. So we still having video issues, guys. Don't worry about it. Let's stick with the audio. Louie Gohmert is pretty much a nuts himself. This is what Louie Gohmert told the Tyler, Texas Morning Herald. He was not given due process, and in fact, if our minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, had gotten the same lack of due process against him previously, I can assure you he would not have been majority leader and he would not now be minority leader. He didn't give Steve King the same kind of fairness that he got over allegations against him. Also, he took the word of the New York Times reporter. Pretty laughable, man.
Well, be careful what you ask for, because remember, Congressman Clyburn stopped short of a censorship, and what that really would have entailed, and I think this is what Gohmert is referring to, King would have been able to defend himself. He would have been able to come defend himself. So be careful what you ask for, because Bobby Rush has made it very clear that's what should have happened in the beginning. And the one thing that Clyburn can do well, he can count votes. Yeah. So if in fact that's what Louie wants, and Louie gets what he wants, the votes are there to even make the punishment more harder than it is at this point in time. But let me please say this to everyone. This is James Crow Esquire.
The third.
I don't know if it's the third, the fourth, the fifth, but it's nothing more than the sophisticated cousin of old Jim Crow. It's not gone anywhere. And as far as raising money, remember the Ku Klux Klan, up until the time the Southern Poverty Law Center sued them, they were a very rich organization. Matter of fact, not far from where you are, Roland, at this point in time. Many people fail to realize Indiana used to be the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. So I'm not surprised that he's raising money, but also in Iowa, he only won this time by 2%. So he's got a target on his back, and this is really going to be up to the people of Iowa.
Roland, you know something I think that's interesting is that in America, particularly now today, Americans by and large, and read when I say Americans, I'm not often talking about black Americans, don't seem to understand when exactly something is racist. When Dylan Roof shot up a church in South Carolina, then Governor Nikki Haley came out and said, we will never know what motivated a person to commit such a heinous crime. Dylan Roof told us what motivated him to commit such a heinous crime. People are out here signing up to be racist, and their colleagues are saying, oh, no, that's not racism. And my all-time favorite, and this must be one of the descendants of James Crow Esquire, as Brother Madison just pointed out, the real racism is calling someone racist. Because that's what we're seeing to get a whole lot these days. And Steve King is one of those folks. Steve King sat, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at the time, next to April Ryan on MSNBC's set during the 2016 conventions, and looked dead in someone's face and said, so what has anyone other than Western civilization ever created? As though Kemet in Egypt doesn't exist. And so, by and large, Steve King has doubled down on his racism time and time again. And Louie Gohmert and others who now support him, let's not forget, we heard recently on the floor of the House of Representatives, go back to Puerto Rico, where there may be allegations that they were alluding to the congressional delegation that went there for a fact-finding mission. But by and large, we think they were talking to Representative Tony Cardenas, right?
Who, by the way, was born in the United States.
right. And so,
I want to go to right now. I want to go to Congressman Danny Davis of Illinois, who joins us on the phone. Danny, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Roland. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm actually in your home state of Illinois, speaking to the Human Rights Commission tonight in Decatur, Illinois. So that's where I am. And so I do want to ask you, just get your thoughts just about your colleague, Steve King, raising money off of Congress, slapping him down this week.
Well, let me tell you, Joe Wilson raised a whole lot of money when he called President Barack Obama a liar at the State of the Union address. if you recall. And so I don't think this is anything unusual. We are so upset here in the city of Chicago until it's unbelievable. I mean, we've just had 2 verdicts passed down that you couldn't think would have happened. You know, the guy who shot Laquan McDonald 16 times just got sentenced just a slap on the wrist, few months. I mean, you could, after we shut down Michigan Avenue, after we've had every kind of vigil you can have, we've had every kind of discussion, everything you could possibly have, and this gentleman gets a slap on the wrist, and the other policemen who were accused of a cover-up, they got off scot-free. The judge said no cover-up, no evidence of a cover-up, and unless you can't read, you can't see. I mean, Ray Charles could have seen a cover-up, and yet the judge didn't find a cover-up. So, you know, we're kind of hot to trot here in the windy right now.
Definitely understand that, sir. I do want to ask you this. What's happening, of course, there on Capitol Hill. Donald Trump, he is canceling trips to members of Congress had previously had scheduled due to the government shutdown. But it's still interesting, though, that his wife hopped on a government plane and flew down to Florida. And then also Lindsey Graham is on one of these trips to Turkey. And so I guess some people can take trips and others can't.
Well, I guess the president is now playing the dozens with Speaker Pelosi. You know, Nancy said that, you know, maybe we ought to just hold off on the State of the Union. And he comes back and say, well, maybe you ought to hold off on your trip to visit the troops. And, you know, I think this is so asinine, so unbelievable that this president is trying to put us in a state of war for the next 2 years, where there will be nothing to do but work towards getting rid of him so that he can be out of our way, out of our lives, and certainly out of our government.
Well, Congressman Danny Davis, it's always a pleasure, sir, to talk to you. Keep up the good fight. And we certainly will watch to see how Chicago responds to Jason Van Dyke getting 81 months in prison, 2/3 less than what prosecutors wanted for him to get.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we always look forward to you being in Illinois. And even though you're not in Chicago, you're in Decatur. That's good enough.
All right, then.
And I know I
Danny
heard
Davis.
the Black Eagle while I was waiting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Joe, it's always good to hear you. Thank both you gentlemen for what you do. We appreciate you so much. You're good for America.
All right. I appreciate it, Congressman. Thank you so very much. All right, folks. The unrelenting criticism of the Women's March leaders continues. This time, folks are now targeting Tamika Mallory because of what she said on the PBS show Firing Line. Here's her talking to Margaret Hoover.
The Palestinians are native to the land. You know, they were there for a very long time, and so they're native to the land.
Do you feel that the Jewish people are native as well?
I mean, I understand the history that, you know, that there are people who have a number of sort of ideologies around why the Jewish people feel this should be their land. I'm not Jewish, so for me to speak to that is not fair.
If you're willing to say that the Palestinians are native but not the Jews are native, I mean, you're not Palestinian either.
Because I'm speaking of the people who we know are being brutally oppressed in this moment. That's just the reality.
Is it your view that Israel has a right to exist as a nation?
I have said many times that I feel everyone has a right to exist. I feel everyone has a right to exist. I just don't feel that anyone has a right to exist at the disposal of another group.
In your view, does that include Israelis in Israel?
I believe that all people have the right to exist, and that Palestinians are also suffering with a great crisis, and that there are other Jewish scholars who will sit here and say the same. And I'm done talking about this. So
Okay.
you can move.
I just don't think it requires scholarly knowledge to be able to say that Israel has a right to exist.
Again, I believe everyone has the right to exist.
So because Tamika did not say these words, Israel has a right to exist, and because she said repeatedly, everyone has a right to exist, now people, Joe Madison, are calling her anti-Semitic because she didn't specifically say the words, Israel has a right to exist. When you say everyone, and now they're trying to say, oh, this is an all lives matter thing. What do you now make of this?
Well, let us understand one thing, and anyone who's been to Israel, and I've been there, and I've discussed and talked and debated, and I've also been to the East Bank. Tamika is absolutely right. There are individuals in Israel who are Jewish that believe that Palestinians have certain rights. There's an organization that I was familiar with and met with their mothers of war victims, and they have an organization called Bridge, and they're trying to resolve some of these serious questions that was put to Tamika. So she was right. There are scholars, there are individuals, there are politicians who, in essence, have taken the same position that she has taken. You don't hear it much in this country, but that is exactly what exists. And it's a big debate, even among Jewish people. So let's put that aside. Tamika was on my show today, and I asked her about this. And the reality is that this has nothing to do with the march that the women have, in fact, organized. The women have issues and platforms that need to be addressed, and to throw this into the middle to attempt to divide the agenda that women are very concerned about as it relates to public policy is just absolutely, totally unfair. And she did point out, look, find a march. So if there's one group over here that wants to march and they disagree with this group over here over a particular policy, then go ahead and march with that group. But this is a matter of remaining focused on women's issues.
So, Ray, again, when I saw this on social media as I was flying to Chicago, when we landed, I saw my Twitter feed. And so now the test now is you have to say the words, yes, Israel has a right to exist. Yet, how many people are asked the question, do Palestinians have a right to exist? I mean, see, that to me is why this, and what people also, I think, don't understand is that there's a very long history of African Americans identifying with the Palestinian people because, I mean, you can go back to Andrew Young when he was UN ambassador, right, when he secretly met with them. Andrew Young said before he got back to his office, the Israeli spy agency Mossad already had a transcript that was in the hands of officials in Washington, D.C. by the time he got back. He had to resign from office. When you think about 1984, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. bringing this issue to the fore in the presidential campaign. And because Black people understand oppression. Black people understand living in a place under oppression, and it's as if people don't understand that Black folks get this.
Roland, you're absolutely correct, and I appreciate the history lesson you laid out there. One thing that any sophisticated thinking citizen in the United States is going to have to do around this question, because it's beginning to bubble up in ways that means that we're going to have a serious conversation about this. And we cannot simply have blacks and Jews can get along. Look at examples of Reverend King and Rabbi Herschel. We're going to have to go beyond that and have a more sophisticated talk. And that talk has to be able to delineate and bifurcate Judaism as a relationship, Jewish human beings, and white supremacy functioning as a state in Israel. Does Israel as a nation, do the people there have a right to exist? Of course, because as Tamika and others said, every human being has a right to exist. Should white supremacy in the form or hiding behind a religion continue to promulgate throughout Israel, throughout the West Bank, throughout Gaza, and even throughout parts of the United States? No. And as you alluded to, Roland, Black Americans particularly, and people of African descent throughout the world understand what it's like to be the oppressed people, understand what it's like to be boxed out, and so we will side with those who are the oppressed, right? Where there are the oppressed, so shall we be. And we've seen this happen first with Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. We saw this happen with the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and their reneging of Angela Davis's award, and now we're seeing it happen with Tamika Mallory. And for too often, the folks who are making this claim are not doing so out of any sincerity of conviction of their religion as an ethnicity or a group of people, but instead they're using their religion, a noble and decent honor one, to shield their white supremacy.
Now, and let me bring, can I bring up one other point? You didn't,
I do want to add this.
South Africa.
Joe,
I wanted to bring up South Africa.
I was about to bring that up too, but go ahead.
Okay, all right. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I know, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. I want folks to also remember one of the major debates we had during the apartheid movement was Israel's support for the South African regime. And we had that major debate. So, you know, let's be honest when we had this discussion. You are absolutely right. We need to understand this is a serious discussion. We have the right to identify with oppressed people. I'll say it here. Yes, Israel has a right to exist. But the reality, it needs to exist as a democratic country where all rights of all of its citizens are respected, and Palestinians are human beings, and they want respect and humanity. And so, you know, but I don't want people to, you know, forget that when South Africa was going through its anti-apartheid movement, man, I almost got thrown out of Israel because I took on at the time the prime minister about his support, and he looked at me like he could cut my throat.
Eugene, let me jump in real quick before you go. Former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, after he came out of office, was on the record saying what's happening in Gaza is equivalent to apartheid in South Africa, which Brother Madison just mentioned. And I thought to myself upon reading that, I wish someone could do something about that. Who would be a good person who could stop what was happening from being like apartheid? Perhaps the Prime Minister of Israel could have done it. Ehud Olmert. I'm sorry, Eugene. Please go ahead.
You're fine. I got a couple quick hits. First and foremost, I guess all lives matter doesn't exist when it comes to this particular issue. I haven't seen a lot of these news anchors and journalists asking people, you know, do all lives matter? Do Black lives matter? The same way they're pressing out Tamika Mallory. I think we all believe that Israel has a right to exist, but so does the Palestinians, so do Christians in Muslim countries, so do Muslims in China. I mean, we believe that, you know, oppressed people should not be oppressed. They should be as free as we are here in the United States. That's one of the beauty of the United States. But I'll take it a step further. You know, how much is an ally as somebody that's spying on you? I mean, let's talk about that eventually. You know, how much spying Israel does on the United States. I mean, it's not, you know, one thing that you know, and this may offend some of my political connection over to Jay-Z, one thing I just don't understand is how, you know, we rush to kiss the ring or so when we neglect things here in the homeland. I mean, folk that will make this argument against Tamika Mallory were just 2 weeks ago defending Steve King. So, I mean, you know, white supremacy and love of the Jewish people cannot coexist. But to take it further with the Women's March, because we're losing sight of that, in their actual platform, they give voice to the plight of Jewish women.
Right.
You know, they give voice to the plight of Jewish women. And folk need to identify that and highlight that if you're going to come and press Tamika Mallory out on her affiliations that have absolutely nothing to do with the Women's March.
And you know, on my show this morning, and I believe I'm totally accurate on this because I had a former president of a university tell me this. You know, they were taking her on because of her relationship with Minister Farrakhan.
Yeah.
Do you know that Minister Farrakhan spoke at West Point?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see anybody prepared to boycott the military academy. So let's be, let's understand. We're not all going to agree on everything when we form coalitions, but I bet folks are floored to find out that that actually happened. He was invited to speak to West Point cadets.
But the thing,
Go ahead, Eugene.
The thing is this: as a society, as a country, as a nation, as a world, we have to come to the understanding that hey, you can disagree with the policies, with the state, with the government of particular people, and not hate the people. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with the phrase, hey, maybe we should be supporting a president or prime minister that's currently have charges against them for corruption, and Bibi Netanyahu.
So here's the deal. So I guarantee you somebody will say, how in the hell can you have 4 men on television?
I was just going to say that, Roland.
Well,
we're nuanced enough to support women.
I was a substitute. Somebody had to cancel, so I'm going to.
We're nuanced enough and non-toxic enough to actually support and defend women and the rights of women.
Strong men appreciate strong women.
Just for folks who know, yes, we've had folks who canceled. Also, we had Jamira Burley book from New York. We had some Skype issues. We couldn't get her on. And I got to say this here. So Mercy Morganfield of Washington, D.C., black woman. I think we got her photo. So she has been highly critical of the Women's March leaders. She has joined a chorus of others and asking them to step down. I told my team to book Mercy Morganfield on the show. Mercy Morganfield said yes. She was locked. She then went back and watched some previous interviews that I've done, and she decided, I ain't going there. So she canceled. Now, I do want, because in fairness, I'm all about fairness. Because when somebody wants to make a point, they want to make a point, and so I'm looking for. So I want to read for y'all what she wrote. This is fair. This is what she wrote. This is what she said to my team as to why she canceled. She said, "I would like to thank you for your invite to Roland Martin, Unfiltered. I never watched the show. However, after watching a few interviews, it appears Roland does not look for opposing viewpoints to the ones he already shares for the purpose of a balanced discussion. Not true. He seems to have opposition on the show for the purpose of sensationalism. Not true. He wants to shut them down quickly, get a lot of likes and amens, and move on to the next topic. I got 2 million social media followers, and I'm married to a minister. I got enough amens. Amen. I am disappointed. She writes, I am disappointed a former CNN journalist would have such a lack of journalistic integrity and would never want to subject myself to that type of experience, nor would I want to legitimize his views by playing along with the show of balanced journalism that simply does not exist. Morgan, if you notice, this is actually a subjective show. It is one where opinions are actually loud. Guess what? So are on CNN shows. Guess who gives their opinion on CNN? Chris Cuomo, Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, Don Lemon. Did you know that? She writes, I hope Roland will consider this in the future, not only for the Women's March story, but for others. Okay. We need black journalists. I love this one, y'all. We need black journalists, not black, it should be journalists, with credibility, but nothing I have seen in any of his segments supports that. Well-balanced reporting means listening to opposing views, even if you don't agree. For this, I decline your invitation to appear on his show. Best regards, Mercy Morganfield. Again, Mercy, this is an opinion show. This is a subjective show where it is allowed, just like when you watch other shows on television today. Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Lawrence O'Donnell, Ari Melber, those are all shows. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity. It's called subjective first. We have people who do come on the show who I oppose their views. Morgan, you might want to go watch the interview that I did with Jason Whitlock, or go watch the interview that I did with Dinesh D'Souza, and you will see that we actually have these conversations on the show. But also, when you talk about somebody not having journalistic integrity, I just want to remind you that you're talking to the 2013 NABJ Journalist of the Year. You're talking to the 4-time NAACP Image Award winner, who has won for the last 2 years, the only 2 years it's existed, as best host. And so if you're going to say what black people need, let me explain to you, black people have spoken. And so, Morgan, if you would like to come on the show of the back-to-back winner of Best Host from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, you're more than welcome. But I would advise you to get your stuff together, because I will check you if needed. We'll love to see. Eugene, Joe, and Ray, appreciate y'all being on the show. Thanks a lot. I want to thank folks. I know this is a little bit different than how we do this show, but again, I literally had no time, so I threw the laptop up, put a light on my face. We're here. Thanks to all my staff. Also, I want folks, please do me a favor. I want you to support us at Roland Martin Unfiltered. I want you to go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Well, every dollar that you give goes to support the show. That's what we want you to do. And then, why is this important? This weekend on Monday, we're going to have 1-hour interviews with civil rights legends. Reverend C.T. Vivian, Lenona Clayton. We're going to have Reverend Dr. James Lawson. We're going to have Clarence Jones. We're going to hear from Nita Abernathy. We're going to hear from Andrew Young, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. We're going to hear from Bernice King and Martin Luther King III. This is why this show matters. I guarantee you, all of the cable networks, the broadcast networks, the black networks out there are not going to give you this type of in-depth coverage of civil rights legends like Roland Martin Unfiltered. That's what you are supporting when you join our fan club. So please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Every dollar you give, so you can do your Cash App, PayPal, or you can also give to us via Square. Thanks a bunch, folks. I'm going to try to live stream my speech indicator. If not, I will record it and we'll live stream it this weekend as well. You guys have an absolutely great weekend. Don't forget, we're not live on Monday because we're going to be running all of those interviews. So we're back live on Tuesday. We still want you to watch some amazing dialogues. And the only place, and also Dorothy Cotton, her last sit-down interview she did with me in February of 2018, and she died 3 months later. We're going to have that for you as well. So have a great weekend. I'll see you guys live on Tuesday. San Jose, California, I'll see you on Monday for MLK. Thanks a bunch. Holla! You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. All right, folks, Roland Martin here. I just landed in Decatur. First of all, Springfield, Illinois. Flight was delayed. Drove to Decatur, Illinois. So I'm here. Sorry we were late. Of course, today is Friday, January 18th, 2019. On today's show, of course, the sentencing for Jason Van Dyke, the former Chicago cop who shot and killed Laquan McDonald. He was convicted of second-degree murder in that case. Today, he found out how long he is going to serve time in prison. We'll have a live report from Chicago. More details are emerging about the racism at a General Motors plant in Toledo, Ohio. We will talk with an official from the Ohio Civil Rights Commission who investigated racism at that particular plant. Also, Tamika Mallory, co-president of the Women's March and a guest on last night's show, is still being attacked because of her support for Palestinians. We'll break it all down for you. Also, R. Kelly no longer has a record deal. We'll tell you why Sony Music dropped R. Kelly today. And also, Texas Congressman Louie Gohmert is absolutely crazy. He decided to double down on the comments by Steve King after he was already blasted in a 424-1 vote by the U.S. House. Wait until you hear what Gohmert has to say. And also, more crazy white folks. It's a new job opening at McDonald's. Black folks, we can feel it. We can tell you exactly what happened. The more craziness in America. It's time to bring the funk. I'm Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's rolling, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's